Hey everybody, and welcome back to the channel. Today we are out here at beautiful Evelyn Lake in Yosemite National Park. As you can see, there is a blanket of snow all over the ground. This weekend was the first snow of the season here in the Sierra Nevada mountains. There was a winter storm warning. That didn't shy me away. I actually love winter camping. It just has this magical feeling out here with the snow. It just creates this different feel. So I am out here today. I'm going to be reviewing this SlingFin WindSaber tent. I've actually reviewed a couple of other SlingFin tents, the Portal 2 and the Crossbow 2. Was actually out here 2 weeks ago reviewing the Crossbow 2, and there was green grass everywhere and I was wearing shorts. So things can change quickly here in the mountains. But in any case, I know this tent is part of their Expedition series of tents, and the Crossbow actually is part of their Treeline series. So they have similar features and kind of look very similar in terms of their storm worthiness for winter, but there actually are a few things about this tent that takes it up a notch in terms of its storm worthiness. So I've had this tent for about a year. I've used it only 4 times. Last winter was just a kind of an oddity with the epic winter. I actually didn't go out into the snow at all because of just the amount of snow coming down literally every weekend with atmospheric rivers. It was just unsafe. So used it before winter and then a couple of times after winter, and now we are in what would be season 2. So have figured out some things that it does really well in challenging conditions, and then some things that I think could be improved. So we'll talk today about key features, then we'll talk about dislikes and dislikes. Likes and dislikes. So let's get into those key features. First of all, the shape of this tent, as you can see, is actually a little bit different from the Crossbow tent. It has similar kind of rectangular shape, but over here on this end, as you can see, it's kind of bumped out a little bit. And what that is there's actually a pole that comes around here on this side to give it that shape. And what that does is actually on the inside, it gives you more headroom on that side. So instead of having to kind of sit up and be headroom clear, kind of nestled in the middle of the tent, you can actually sit up over here on this end of the tent and have as much headroom as you would there in the middle. This is definitely a benefit for just, of course, having that extra headroom, but also times when you have the doors open or the vents open and there's wind coming through the middle there, which maybe you want, you can actually tuck yourself back there a little bit more and actually remain out of the wind some. Okay, next key feature of this tent is the full wall. So full wall, typically for wintertime or mountaineering expedition tents, is really important because it's going to protect and stop that wind from coming through into the tent. If you're having, wind and cold combined together, that wind chill is just going to eventually suck all the heat out of your body and make you freezing cold. So having that full wall all the way around and up and over is really good for that, but also to keep stuff from blowing up and in. Stuff like sand, dust, snow, of course. It stops all that from coming up and in. There is also ventilation, so you can open up vents. It does have double doors, so that's really nice for being able to get in and out on both sides. And within the doors, there are also mesh vents. And this has mesh vents in through the entire door, so you get a lot of air that can flow through the door vents. There's also on this side over here a Thru-vent. And what that is basically a vent that goes all the way through to the inner part of the tent. And I really like that feature. It just works a lot better than other styles of vents that you might see on other similar tents. So it's great for ventilation and also great for being able to close that entirely. Another key feature of this tent is the Web-truss. And this is something that's common across many of the SlingFin tents, but basically it's some pole sleeves that run across the 2 poles that go from corner to corner. And essentially, once you put the poles into the sleeves, there are tensioners on the corner that enable you to tension down the poles. And as those sleeves pull the poles together, they become tensioned, and it really just increases that strength. So I'm pushing down really hard right now, and it's not budging. So it's very strong. And that's what that Web-truss does, is it increases that strength profile of the tent, helps with minimizing, of course, any snow loading effect, or just wind hitting the tent is not going to cause stress or flex on those poles. Now, another interesting feature for storm worthiness is this outrigger attachment, which is essentially a pole cup, which enables you to Velcro the top portion of the pole into that crossbar. So there's a crossbar right here. And without that there, you could actually push down on this, which of course you had snow loading here that could be bad. But what this does is it basically gives you another set of poles to further increase the strength of the tent. And once you attach, of course, a guy line over here, it's going to prevent any of that wind effect, that lateral motion on the tent. So definitely improves that strength. One specific call out around this is that, as you can see, it does make the door entryway here a little bit smaller. So there is still plenty of room to get in and out, but you do need to kind of get past that, wedge yourself past that, but it's not an issue. So this is a really neat feature. Of course, you need to have poles with you in order to take advantage of that. And in the wintertime, I often do have poles because things like snowshoeing and skiing, or just wanting to be protecting myself a little bit from falling through. So I've got poles with me today, and these actually did really help with this weekend. There was blowing snow or blowing wind across the tent here, and I literally had no issues. And I think that just also helped with that. Another key feature here on the Fly is there are two small vestibules on both sides. They are, I think, a pretty good size. They're not too big, but they're also not too small. And I think it's nice to have a maybe smaller vestibule for a tent of this nature that's designed for challenging weather conditions. Having a larger vestibule here is just going to catch more of that wind and make it harder to have a low profile in heavy wind. Another interesting feature or note on these doors here is that there is a vent that is also part of the Fly, which you attach here. And this is basically just a kickstand. And with that on there, it actually works pretty good. I've given SlingFin kind of some dings in the last 2 tent reviews that I've done. Now that I've had some more and more experiences where I'm out in basically rain, hail, snow, and so forth, I've actually found that this kickstand setup here actually works pretty good. Other than the fact that it's integrated into the door, which makes it just slightly more complicated to get in and out of the door over here, it really does work well. The fact that it is up here at the peak, I think it does permit good airflow through the tent. And then if you have also that other vent open, it's actually pretty good. So the kickstand, I would actually give it thumbs up on this tent. The other point I would make is that the little kickstand thing here is maybe 2 or so inches, 3 inches shorter than the kickstand that's on their other tents. Of course, I think that's by design because of the expectation that when you're out in the winter time, maybe there's actually more wind, so you don't need as much of a hole opening in order to allow airflow through there. Okay, on the inside of the tent, there are 8 mesh pockets. There's one big one down here that goes across on those sides. And then over here, there are a variety of 7 pockets on the bottom, and then there are 2 on the top. That definitely helps with just keeping stuff off the ground, keeping things organized. If you put stuff in there, it can help to keep it ventilated as opposed to jamming it in and getting stuck on the floor. There's also a lot of hooks or just O-rings in order to attach stuff onto, so you can run your own lines across and hang things, which is what I've done. Another key point that I want to make on this tent that I think is different from other tent manufacturers that SlingFin has is over here there are 2 backup zipper poles. There are 2 poles on every single door so that you can have it go whichever way you want. But there's also 2 backup poles, and there's a little guard there that keeps them kind of in this area contained. But in the event that you have an issue with your poles, one of the poles, you can slide this pole underneath that guard or cut this little black strip of fabric to get it out there. And basically now you have 2 working poles again. Now apparently the zipper pole is the most common thing to fail on any tent. On my Z-Packs duplex, I actually had one of the zippers fail. They sent me out some replacements, and I did repair it on my own. I'm telling you, it was a pain in the butt, and it may not necessarily be as easy on different styles of tents. So the fact that they're integrated onto both the zippers on the door, the outer Fly, really anywhere there's a zipper, I think that's just a really neat thing. In the event that I do have a problem when I'm out here in the wild, I can just basically get back to a good place right on the spot. Okay, let's talk about weight. Now, typically mountaineering style tents are in that 8 to 9 pound range. So this tent here is actually around 5 pounds, depending upon what things you're bringing with, guy lines and so forth. Some of the things are removable too, but basically 5-pound tent is actually pretty reasonable. I've got a few other winter tents. One of them is closer to 4 pounds, but it doesn't have 2 doors, doesn't have all these great features. So having just a little bit more weight, but then having all these great features is actually worth it to me. This might seem like a luxury item or whatever. Some people are super ultra light and might even question, why do you even need a 5-pound winter tent? Well, I generally go out in very challenging conditions. Of course, you could probably bring a summer tent out here right now. It's sunny, right? And it's not like blizzard conditions, but in the event that you did take a summer tent out into those conditions, you'd be miserable. There'd be snow and stuff blowing up and under the mesh. The poles would probably eventually fail from either wind or snow loading. So 5 pounds is, I think, pretty reasonable, again, compared to those 8 or 9 pound other tents that are out there in that wintertime or expedition style tent range. Okay, let's talk about what are my likes. So first of all, my number one like, and absolutely the reason why I bought this tent, is its performance and strength in challenging weather and conditions. It absolutely has stood up in terms of what I expect and delivered on all of that. Last night here, there was just sideways blowing wind, and the tent actually on the inside, you could hear maybe the fly flapping just very slightly, but in general, it didn't budge at all. So it is very strong. It is also very resistant to wind and those blowing conditions, whether it's blowing snow or blowing sand. I actually took this tent to Joshua Tree and had to deal with extreme wind there, and it actually helped me to keep the sand from coming into my tent. So has a lot of uses, not just in wintertime, but also the fact that, and this is also one of my biggest likes about this tent, is that full mesh door. So not only can it keep you protected in environments where you don't want stuff to be blowing into the tent, the fact that it has this double mesh and the full mesh door is just a lifesaver, because there's always times where you want to get more ventilation, whether you're using this tent in situations where it's buggy, or you have an expedition and you can only bring one tent and you need something that can fit a wide range of conditions. The fact that you can open the door and get that full mesh here is just better than the Crossbow 2, which is something that I actually said I disliked on that tent because it only had basically a half circle for mesh there. So this is great for ventilation, as well as that vent over here, the Thru-vent. I love this vent. It just works better than other mountaineering tents that I've had in the past, which have basically just a thin strip of mesh in the top portion. The fact that you can actually open this hole and then open the mesh too enables that unobstructed air. So the mesh isn't actually blocking the air from flowing through that Thru-vent. So great for ventilation. Okay, another one of my likes is over here, that extra headroom. I really like the fact that there's this area over here that just increases that volume on this side of the tent. I can sit over there. I don't need to be always sitting directly in the middle of the tent if I don't want my head to be brushing against the ceiling. Also, if in the event I ever do have 2 people, the fact that there is this other area over here, I think you could have somebody kind of sitting here and somebody sitting up over here. You're not both sitting up in the same spot. Okay, last 2 likes. Also like the color. This off-white and orange, I actually really like this orange. It does, of course, stand out a little bit here amongst the white. That could be a good thing in the event that if I ever have an emergency and somebody was out in the wilderness looking for me in my tent. Of course, if I have a white colored tent, they may not see me if they were searching for me. Now, I do carry, of course, an inReach so I can alert people in the event of an emergency. But of course, I think that is one of the reasons why oftentimes mountaineering tents do have very bright colors, is because they want to be visible when you're up on a mountain and it's just pure snow all the way around. So like that color. Also, the warranty on this tent, as well as all of the other SlingFin tents, is a lifetime warranty. I've not had any issues with this so far. The quality on it is very top-notch. Everything in terms of the stitching, the zippers, everything just seems to be very, very well put together. But with that lifetime warranty, I know that they're going to take care of me like they have with situations, warranty claims on my other SlingFin tents. So great company in terms of that warranty protection. Okay, moving on to dislikes. This is something that I've pointed out on the Portal 2 and the Crossbow, is basically that the toggles that they are using here, they're not the correct size for this line. Basically, I can just pull that off. So I pulled that off because the line here is very narrow. It's a thin line, which is good because it's lightweight. And they've got a knot here on the end, but you'd need a couple of knots here on the end to actually keep you from being able to pull that off. And as you add more knots, it's going to make the line shorter, which is then going to make it more difficult to get it through that hole. So I guess my hope would be that the next iteration that they choose a different toggle with a smaller hole. That'll just keep that from falling off. I don't want to have to worry about losing pieces of my tent. If I didn't have that toggle, it would make it a pain in the butt to close the doors out in the field. So that's a pretty minor thing. Doesn't really affect me because I'm aware of this issue, but first-time users, if you're not paying attention, you definitely could lose that piece. Okay, let's get into my second dislike. I actually just noticed this last night, and it was because of sideways wind that I was expecting here in this campsite. I oriented my tent like this because of the nature of the way that these kickstand flaps work here. When you're opening this door, putting the door out, this flap is designed so that wind hitting it will flow over it, and if there's snow and things like that, it would just fly off that way. If you oriented the tent facing into the wind that way, well, what's going to happen is that's actually going to cause the wind to be cupped and go into the tent. And if there's rain or snow, you'll actually have that coming into that flap. So this orientation, of course, keeps stuff from coming into the tent, which was all good last night. I didn't have any stuff coming into the tent there. However, the fact that you have this Thru-vent over here and then you need to point the tent into the wind, with that sideways snow, I actually had to close the outer fly portion here, the Thru-vent, to seal that off. I was able to keep the inner body Thru-vent open, which did help with air ventilation, but because I closed that off, there was just less airflow. So I guess my thinking would be that in terms of improvements, if the actual flap here were designed in the reverse, meaning that just this portion of it was attached to this section of the fly, and if you will, imagine it being like this, and the wind could be coming over it like that. So if you could point that end into the wind, I think that would be an improvement potentially, because then you could keep the Thru-vent open. So, you know, maybe snow coming up and over the top isn't necessarily going to come through that vent over there. So that would be something that maybe could be an improvement. The designers of this tent, I'm sure, have thought of that. They've got these Thru-vents on a number of their tents. Now, in the end, it might be just that that's the way it's designed. One possible advantage of having this side of the tent facing into the wind, as it was last night, was having that flat wall. I think it prevented some of the wind from coming up and in. So, you know, I guess I'm not entirely 100% certain that it would make sense to have this change, but it could, right? If there was some way to orient the tent in either direction, maybe if this was somehow able to be done in sort of an omnidirectional way, then as a user of the tent, I could pick and choose which side I want that Thru-vent facing, so that I could maybe just use more of that Thru-vent and kind of optimize the use of that Thru-vent. So it wasn't a huge problem for me, but again, just small things that I would love to see improved on this tent. Those are some of those feedback things. All right, so that's it. In summary, I highly recommend this tent. It is a fantastic tent for somebody who needs a tent that can take you out to those challenging weather conditions, mountaineering, whatever. It will stand up to whatever you throw at it. It definitely is a cut above the Crossbow 2 in terms of that storm worthiness, kind of that interior volume space. Admittedly, it does cost a little bit more money and it is slightly heavier, but I think the trade-offs there that you gain with this tent make it better than the Crossbow 2. So definitely recommend this tent. I am confident that this tent will last me a long time. Just the quality of it, the build, the construction, as well as all the features. I don't necessarily see myself needing something different. This does everything that I need it to. Also, in the event I ever have an issue with it, I'm confident that SlingFin will take care of me with that fantastic warranty. All right, so that is it. If you've got any questions at all, feel free to drop them down in the comment box. Anything that I didn't talk about that you're interested in or you want to know more about. Now, as always, happy trails and see you next time.